Welcome to day 13 of our scripture reading and encouragement. Today we're going to cover Genesis 36 and 37, as well as Matthew 13, 1 through 23. So in Genesis, we see Joseph come onto the scene. He's about 17 years old, and it says he works for his brothers, but they don't like him. He reports back the bad things that they do, so they are out tending flocks for their father Jacob. And Joseph's kind of the one that keeps, tabs on them and tells Jacob what's going on with them. Scripture tells us here in Genesis that Jacob loves Joseph more than the other brothers. He's got a robe made for him, and it makes the brothers really jealous. Then Joseph starts having dreams. So they already don't like Joseph. Now he starts having a dream, and in that dream, he literally sees them, all of his brothers, bowing down to him. So that really makes them mad. They're like, "Who are you? You're not going to be our king," or whatever. Um, and then he has a second dream that's similar, and Jacob actually scolds him. Jacob's like, "God, quit talking about that stuff." But the thing is, Jacob's had dreams before from God, and Jacob knew there was probably some significance to those dreams. So Joseph's brothers start to scheme to kill him, and then one of them says, "I'm gonna, manipulate my brothers because we don't want to kill him, and I'll go back and rescue him." So they decide to throw him into an empty cistern, an empty water cistern, to die. And then all of a sudden they see some Ishmaelite leaders coming, down the road, people who are going, they're going from one location to another to sell stuff, and they go, "Hey, we can sell this guy as a slave." So they end up getting him out of the cistern, selling him as a slave. So obviously it was more than just jealousy. They hated their brother. They took the robe that Jacob had made for Joseph and they dipped it in blood of a goat, and they sent it back to Joseph, or I'm sorry, they sent it back to Jacob, telling Jacob that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Then here's where the story gets good, and we don't get too far into it today, but Joseph is then sold to Potiphar. So when the Ishmaelite traders get to Egypt, where the destination is, Joseph is sold to be a slave to Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of the palace guard for Pharaoh. This story gets really good. I'm excited to tell the story of Joseph over the next couple of days, because so many times in my life I found so much encouragement out of this story, because Joseph is a story of a man who's done nothing wrong. He does everything right, and he has some bad things happen, but God uses those circumstances to get him to the exact place he's supposed to be. So as I go through tough times now, and I wonder, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. I can always find comfort in the story of Joseph, and I reference this a lot, but I can always find comfort in this story of how he was mistreated, but God still used it. So I'm excited over the next couple of days to get more into this story, and I know it's going to encourage us all as we go through tough trials. As we switch over to Matthew, we see Jesus. This is where he really, in the book of Matthew, this is where he begins to teach in parables, where he tells stories that make his point. So rather than just teach them point by point by point, he tells stories, that because it's easy for us when we use we might call it an analogy, but when we use these stories or parables, as Jesus called them, it helps us to remember things better. So he starts off with this parable of a farmer. And this is a really cool parable because he talks about a farmer who goes out and spreads seed. Now, there's four types of soil this farmer spreads seed. So the seed is the same. The seed is the message of Jesus Christ. The seed is the gospel. The seed is that Jesus came, the message that Jesus came to save us. He died for us. It's the message that we're going to spread to people. So the seed is the same in this scenario, but it goes to four different types of soil. The first soil is a footpath. In other words, there's not a lot of good soil there. It's trampled down soil that the seed is not going to be able to absorb into. And it says the birds came and ate it. And Jesus later tells the disciples, when he tells the meaning of this parable, he says this represents when someone hears the gospel, hears about Jesus, the good news, but Satan just comes and snatches it away from them. In the parable, the birds come and eat the seed. Basically, Satan is coming and snatching that seed back up because the people don't understand, or they've got hardened hearts and they don't care. So that's one type of soil. Second type of soil is shallow soil with rock underneath. So now this is not trampled down soil. It's not a footpath, but it's shallow. It's got rock underneath, so you plant the seeds and they sprout really fast. But because they can't get deeply rooted, they die. And he says this represents people that receive the good news with joy. They get all fired up, but their roots aren't allowed to go deep enough, and they've got some underlying problems that they're not addressing. And when problems hit or persecution hits, they just fall away. The third type of soil is a soil that's filled with thorns. And the problem here is the seed falls amongst the thorns, and then it gets choked out. It's crowded out. He says this represents those that the seed is planted, but the worries of their life or the desire for wealth choke out the seeds. I think, and that's what the thorns represent, I think that this could also be told in today's terms of they're busy. They're busy. They're busy with worry. They're busy chasing things. They're busy with their jobs. The fourth soil is obviously the best soil, and that's fertile soil. That's where when the seed lands, it not only produces a good harvest, it produces 30, 40, 100 times more than was planted. This is those who hear and truly understand and then produce fruit. See, as Christians, we're called to produce. The seed is planted. We are supposed to go plant more seed ourselves, but we're supposed to produce something. We're supposed to produce fruit. We've been told over and over through the Gospels that we are supposed to produce fruit. So Jesus is saying, guys, you have to be careful. The seed's the same. There's nothing wrong with the seed. There's nothing wrong with the story. What kind of soil is it going to fall on? So I think we have to look at this for ourselves, because we got to know what kind of soil we are. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably not number 1 or 2. You probably are not a footpath and the birds have eaten it. You're probably not shallow and have turned away. But the question is, are we so busy with life? Do we fall into this third category of the thorns kind of just squashing it out? And I think that's our challenge. Or are we going to be fertile soil? So my encouragement to you today is just evaluate your life and make sure you're the fertile soil that Jesus can use. And then I think we got to look at this in terms of who we talk to and who we invest in and who we spread the seed to. We have to recognize what kind of ground it's falling on. We have to invest our time with people understanding what their soil looks like to help them get to the next. If they are a number 1, let's help get them to number 2. If they're number 2, let's get them to 3. If they're 3, let's get them to 4. Obviously, we're trying to get them all to that 4th stage of fertile soil. So if we're going to disciple or work with someone, we're trying to move them through the stages of being a more fertile soil. And if they are not willing to do that, we have to let them go. So I think it's really cool to see a couple of things in this parable. First of all, we see the disciples asking Jesus, what does your parable mean? And I think there's encouragement there for us, because we don't have to understand. Even the men walking with Jesus didn't understand everything he said. They asked him to stop and explain it. So we can find encouragement there. If we don't understand, if we find ourselves reading the Bible and we don't understand it, go to someone that you respect, go to someone that you trust, and ask them to help you understand it. The disciples did this and set that tone for us. And then the next encouragement is today, focus on what type of soil you are. Focus on making sure that Satan's not just stripping away what you're hearing. Focus on making sure that you're not shallow, that you're not getting fired up and then falling away when worries hit or persecution hits. And please make sure you're not so busy that you don't have time for that seed to sprout. So let's focus on what kind of soil we can be for Jesus, how we can spread seed to others and produce a great harvest. Hope you're encouraged today and have an awesome day.